and he ended up hitting me in the back of the head with a rock club, cracked my skull, gave me 12 staples. I ended up going obviously to the shoe, and that's when I had the little exchange with Snar. And Snar and I ended up sending kites back and forth. Just, you're my brother, you know, come on in. And they kind of get that whole thing. So then you end up getting this rapport, and they make you feel like part of a family. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, you got to go handle this business. And then like you were talking about before, you know, people getting literally charged with murder, and that was never really the intent. I mean, obviously it's a possibility, but I don't think that that was the intent on that hit exactly, is to kill the dude.
So let me ask you this, right, brother? I know you were a part of SAC. Some of your own people end up jumping on you, soldiers of Aryan culture. What happened?
Basically, the situation obviously has more minute details than this, but basically what happened on a larger scale is that Brad Wasson, who you talked about yesterday in your video, thought that I was trying to take the yard from him. And so he made up some total BS and had my own probate. And by the way, for those that aren't completely familiar or read in on the prison lexicon, a probate is basically somebody that is underneath you that you are bringing into the gang that you're going to tip up. And so I'll just for anonymity reasons, I'll leave his name at Brian, but his name was Brian. And he ended up hitting me in the back of the head with a rock club, cracked my skull, gave me 12 staples. And I ended up going obviously to the shoe. And that's when I had the little exchange with Snar. And Snar and I ended up sending kites back and forth. And he was basically like, look, man, fuck Brad, fuck all that. He said, hit Brad, you stay SAC. And I, quite frankly, wrote him back because at that point I had realized the fallacy in what I was doing. And I was like, dude, and really what really set it off for me was the fact that my father had sent me a letter that said, JD, when are you going to learn that you're not the judge, jury, and executioner? When are you going to learn that that's not your job or your role in life? When are you going to learn that your whole motivation should just be coming home to your family? And when my pops sent me that letter, it put me in tears. And I wrote Snar back and I said, look, man, I said, I'm going to go out the right way. Believe me when I tell you, I'm not going to snitch, quote unquote. But I can't do this anymore, because if I ever want a chance at the streets, this is not the way to get it.
So you had your own people, your white gang member, white supremacist gang, you know, whatever. It is what it is, right? So your own people hit you, you get hit in the back of the head, you end up getting stitches or staples. What hospital? Do they mercy flight you?
No, I didn't get mercy flown. I did get taken out on a stretcher, and I had actually a 9.5-inch knife in my pants at the time. And when the lieutenant that had me on the stretcher found the knife, he was basically like, look, tell us who did this and why, and I'll make this knife shot go away. So if you're from the feds, you'll know that a knife shot is a 100 series shot, which is obviously the most serious that they get. I mean, the only one above, there's a few above a knife shot, but they're all anywhere from 100 to say a 108. And so point is that it was a very serious thing. And I told the lieutenant, and you can look at the incident report, I said, fuck you. And I'm sorry, I am a believer, and I really want to make this message positive, but I'm also not a faker either. So I'm going to speak the way I speak.
Well, I appreciate you doing that. So you end up going to the hospital. What are you thinking? What's going through your mind that these dudes just hit you, man?
Well, JD is a person. Myself, I'm a sensitive guy, man. I give my heart and my love to my friends and to my family. And quite frankly, I expect people to give me that same love in return. And when that happened, I felt the epitome of betrayal in the deepest recesses of my heart. and it hurt my soul more than you even know, because as you know from your experience, and your even chaos and everybody else that I mean, and plus, like, again, your own experience. I mean, man, like, you're literally in a battle zone, a war zone with these guys. So like, you bleed for them. You really think that they're your brothers, and that's what they convince you. And then, but it's only when it's convenient. And I'm sorry, but I didn't want to fall in line with that anymore. And I realized that the only way that I was going to have a chance at success outside is if I was able to get out. And the only way I was able to get out was to get out of the gang, because, man, as soon as you get that gang, like, I used to tell people it was for protection or whatever. That's not true. It wasn't for protection. I'm a pretty good at fighting. I mean, I don't need protection. The problem is that I didn't like the hold that the Aryan Brotherhood had on the system, and how people got all weird around them and started, like, salivating at the mouth and everything. And I was like, what are you guys doing? Like, and when SAC was the only gang that decided to stand up to them, I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that. So, they sought me out as much as I sought them out, honestly.
Let's talk about that. What goes into becoming a white gang member in federal prison? What is it like when they approach you, or they're like, yo, what's up, bro? You want to ride with us? I mean, are these the dudes you're hanging out with? They just see you? I mean, how's it go?
That's a really good question, and I would beg the explanation that the situation probably differs person to person, but I can tell you what happened to me, and that was pretty much, I got in there, I kind of had the look. I've always been kind of in decent shape, worked out, martial arts half my life, all that kind of stuff. And so when I got in there, I always became like a quote unquote, I mean, I'm not saying this with any ego, but it's just, I have an opinion and I'm not afraid to talk about it. And so I would always become kind of like a shot caller of sorts, or like a housing unit rep or whatever. And so I guess my point is that they kind of saw me in action. I did something that I'm ashamed of, but I mean, I roundhoused a guy in the face and knocked out his back molar, and they saw that and they thought I was a ninja or something, and it just went from there. And again, the appeal really was basically based on the fact that I didn't like the grasp of the Aryan Brotherhood on the system and how people changed their demeanors when they were around. So if I had a chance to join something that was anti that, I wanted that.
And the SAC dudes did end up beefing with the ABs in Victorville and stuff like that, right?
From what I understand, I wasn't there for that, but yes, and actually that happened before. I believe that happened before I joined SAC, and that's what kind of got me over the top.
So when you join SAC, do you feel like this is a brotherhood? This is a camaraderie. These are my dudes. I'm ready. I'm going to die for these guys if it comes down to it.
100%. And again, like I tried to say before, like, I have this heart for people, and when I tell somebody that I care for them, or that I love them, or that I'm ride or die, I actually mean that. And when somebody gets intimidated, or not even intimidated, but they feel that their power structure is in jeopardy, then they turn your own people against you. I mean, it's the ultimate betrayal, man. And then especially when it, like, literally is physical harm and just like brutal violence. I mean, it's not a fun thing.
Let me ask you this, because other people would just be happy to have you on their YouTube channel doing an interview, right? But I'm going to ask you some questions that other people probably wouldn't ask, because they're like, I got you on my channel, kind of salivating, right? When these dudes hit you, they have a reason. They're not going to say, hey, well, we thought he was going to try to take the yard. Their reasoning is, what was their reasoning for hitting you?
I see what you're
What was
saying.
the rumor?
The rumor is that, and again, I don't really even know the whole rumor. I just know what I heard after I got to the shoe. And Brad was trying to basically place a label on me, saying that I was a snitch, which not only was impossible, but it just wasn't true. I mean, why would I snitch, dude? If I got, like, literally could have probably gotten out of my situation. We haven't even talked about why I went to prison yet. And my point is that if I was going to snitch, that would have been the time, because then I wouldn't have done 15 fucking years.
Yeah,
So
we're gonna talk about that in a minute. So I mean, they put this label on you. Look, I've seen it plenty of times where white gang members, black, Hispanic, they put a bone on somebody, man, to justify the violence that they commit against someone that's supposed to be one of their own. You've seen it yourself, right?
100%, and I'll agree with you 100%. Like you said, the reason that I gave you was what was my intuition. That's what I read off the whole situation, right? Was that he was actually afraid that I was going to take the yard from him, and that all came out later. But point is that yes, to get Brian to hit me, all he had to say is hit JD, and even if Brian said no, then Brad'd be like, okay, well, we're going to hit you, and it would have gotten messy. But point is that yes, you're right. There was the underlying story, and he tried to, like you said, put a bone on me, and it wasn't true. Everybody knew that. Nobody thought that was true. They all thought it was complete bullshit, and that's why when I went to the shoe and Snar sent me the kites and whatnot, he literally said, "Screw Brad, blah blah blah. You stay SAC, fuck him." So, you know,
So you're in the hole in the person, so people know the dude you're talking about is Snar. He ends up getting off death row from Joe Biden. He does some pretty vicious stuff over there at Beaumont with a Spanish dude, and they execute a dude, whatever. But I want people to know who you're talking about. You're
yeah,
communicating with Snar. What was he like when he was down? Because he was on death row when you were communicating with him,
Yeah,
right?
he was on absolutely. He was on death row upstairs. So we used to get kites through two ways, either the orderlies or we would get them through the heating ducts, the vents. And we it was a meticulous process and it was obviously really difficult and you had to write in little teeny baby letters. But yeah, we were just sending kites up and down through the chutes because first of all, we had a lieutenant on our side, SAC did, and this was at USP Terre Haute. I was in a step down program called the Blue and Gold program, and Snar was on death row which is basically right above the shoe in USP Terre Haute. And so, I'm in the shoe and we're talking back and forth through the heating ducts.
What was he like? I mean, even though he had a death sentence, he was still hard he was still SAC, right?
Oh, dude, without a doubt, super passionate, super amazing dude. Like, honestly, I have no problem with him at all, and I hope that one day maybe we even get a chance to talk because I didn't go out the wrong way. I put my life on that. And point is that it was just one of those things. And I would almost venture to guess because he is not stupid in any way, shape, or form. I would venture to guess that he probably, if he could have gone and changed hitting that cop and then unlocking the cell and then going and killing that DC Black with the Mexican mafia dude, if he could go back and change that, he probably would have. And even more than that, anybody that's done any amount of time, it's just not fun, dude. It's not what's meant for the human body or the psyche.
So when you do drop out of the gang, right? Does it hurt your feelings? Are you hurt inside? Like, damn, these were my dudes, and I'm done now.
100%. And even more than just it was hurt more like I was embarrassed kind of because I don't know if anybody into martial arts will know, like, you get put in a rear naked or whatever, and you end up having to tap or whatever the case may be. It sucks having to admit that, you can't go on anymore. And so a part of me was like, oh, if I drop out, it's because, it'll be read as I can't go on. And then I realized that where my feelings were really stemming from was the fact that I was putting too much credit into what other people thought about me. And I realized that shouldn't even matter. And when you see how serious prison is and how it literally rips fathers away from their children, guys that are good people that just make a simple mistake or maybe even a series of mistakes. I've met so many guys that are in there, man, that are just crying, like telling me, man, I wish I would have done things different. And point is I don't believe that fatherhood and all the good things that men look forward to in life should be taken away because of one mistake.
Hey, I mean, I told you at the beginning when we talked yesterday. I mean, I can tell that you're an intelligent dude. I said that again, today. But let's talk about some of the violence, right, that you experienced. We'll get into why you went to prison in a minute, but some of the violence that you've seen, that you experienced. What was one of the worst things that you actually seen in federal prison?
The only reason I'm smiling is because I actually was kind of a little nervous to come on this cast, to be honest with you, because I look up to you, I respect what you're doing, and I was a little bit tentative. So I'm not gonna lie when I say I only slept a few hours last night, and I literally laid there and like contemplated different scenarios and questions that you might ask. And one of the ones that I knew you were gonna bring up was what was one of the worst things that you saw. And I'm gonna give you two. And the first one is this. This was at USP Terre Haute. We're in the blue and gold program. I'm actually sitting, funny enough, with I believe he was a I want to say he was a Texas Aryan Brotherhood or some weird shit that we didn't even really recognize. But either way, he was my friend, and his name was Kid. He was actually my cellie, and so he was a good kid, man. And we were looking upstairs, and it turns out that a DC Black had gotten caught stealing, and the sergeant of arms or sergeant at arms or whatever for the DC Blacks took this guy to the shot caller, which his cell was literally right above the table we were sitting at, and they stretched this guy's hands out on the door frame. These doors, by the way, weigh about 400 pounds. They're solid steel. They're freaking indefensible. It probably would survive a freaking nuclear blast for all I know. They're crazy heavy. And so they stretched his hands out on this door frame and slammed this 400-pound door frame into this dude's hands and just shattered them. And you think that's the worst part? Uh-uh. They took him in the cell after that, stabbed him 27 times, and apparently raped him. I didn't see the actual rape happen, but I wouldn't be surprised. We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So, there's some vicious things that go on in there, right?
100%, man. And it's and the saddest part about it is that it's a lot of the times it's really for no reason. He said, she said shit, political issues, like stuff that doesn't even matter. And you're literally talking about like taking someone's life or rearranging their face and literally changing the way that they have the ability to live the rest of their lives because what? Because you make some rules and I just the whole thing just sounds insane to me.
Let's get this clear too, because people are going to listen. They're like, man, DC ain't got no sergeant at arms. They don't got no shot caller. Every prison that I've been to, they always say that, but there's always that dude that they listen to. If he says something, you're going to make it happen. And there's always some dudes in every car, right? Whether you call them sergeant at arms or whatever, there's always someone there that's ready to do the discipline, right?
100%. And I'm using terms that I understand. I don't know what they were actually called. I'm sitting at a table looking up and I'm witnessing this. And that was the way I saw it in my head. So, despite what they want to call themselves or not, you know as well as I do that every car has a shot caller. They just do. You have to when you go to, meetings and all that kind of stuff. There's always somebody representing that car. And so I saw the guy that I knew for a fact was representing that car and a monstrous, I'm talking about absolute giant, probably 6'3", 280 or something, just a massive dude. So I considered him to be their sergeant at arms. So I apologize if I got my facts incorrect with what they call themselves, but believe me when I tell you it happened.
So look, you're in a white gang. You know this black dude stealing. You see his hand get slammed in the door. You say you got some compassion. But what were you guys thinking when that happened? Were you guys, oh, that's good for him? You're in prison. This is prison.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. You get on those. I got on a path for a while where I was in a bad spot, and stuff like that excited me. So yeah, there was a time where I looked at that. I was like, yeah, fuck that dude, right? But I also got a little older and got a little wiser and started talking to God and realized that a lot of the errors in my ways of thinking. And so, yes, to answer your question, honestly, we sat there and we were like, holy crap, I would not want to be that guy. But you know what I mean? We still were kind of like, you deserve it. You stole, motherfucker. So, oops, you shouldn't have stole.
Let's talk about, white gangs in general, right? When you're in prison, there's rules, right? And one of the rules for SAC was, look, no substance abuse, right? And don't use drugs.
In fact, it softened up a little bit over time, but by no means was it ever a soft thing. If you got caught using drugs as a SAC member, it was a definite hard discipline. Like you know, and that would be at the least. I mean, there was a time when that first came into play, from what I understood, and this is before I was SAC, but that they would literally book you for that. And by book, I mean stab you for that. But it got to the point a little later on, especially when some of the higher ups were using, and there was some things going on where they got a little more lax on those rules. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. It was a serious violation.
I mean, we talked about Leo. We did the documentary yesterday. Leo Johns. He gets, Kramer, Crazy Face. Some people know him as Crazy Face. He ends up pretty much executing this dude with Ricky Fackrell, and I like Ricky. Always liked Ricky. Um, he executes this dude because over some drug allegations and all of that stuff. But really, there's been some allegations that Crazy Face was getting high. So you're executing this dude based on him using drugs and not paying his debts, but you're kind of doing the same thing. Some of the SAC rules, when you sign up, do they outline the rules for you, give you a constitution? This is what you got to abide by?
Yeah, I mean they absolutely did me, and it even went further than that. They didn't even just give it to you; they made you memorize it, so you knew exactly what you were strapping up for.
Tell me some of the rules. Are you allowed to gamble with blacks?
Hell no. You can't gamble with blacks. You can't eat with them. I actually here's the weird thing though. If you Some people would say that you can't gamble with blacks. Other people, like when I was SAC, I ran a poker table and I had blacks playing at my poker table, but they said it was okay because I was literally making money off them and really not gambling against them. I was collecting a pot. It was a hustle. So, and then on top of that, like here's where it gets really crazy. So you can't, like, let's say, like in state it's different, by the way. Like California state, for sure you can't gamble with them. There's differences, but the feds are a little more, they're more about money. That's what I would say. The difference between state and feds is the feds are more money centric. So like if you have a hustle, they're not going to bash your hustle. I mean, unless it's some weird shit or something. But the point is that you can pretty much get away with that, but you can't eat with them, you can't eat after them. um but the card thing was weird. And what also blew my mind was that, like, you can smoke or do however you ingest the drugs out of a black man's rectum, but you can't play cards with them across the table. Like, how does that make any sense?
I mean, these are the wild prison politics where they say one thing and do another, kind of like an oxymoron, right?
Totally, yeah. Well said, Chad.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit more about some of the stuff in prison. I mean, you were SAC. You ever have to go on a mission?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, actually, over my whole entire term, multiple. Yeah. Um, I, the way I got my patch was I hit a dude in front of commissary that was also a tipped up SAC member that apparently had some issues in his past with, um, how do I say this, like a child, and so I don't know how he even got a patch in the first place, if that was true. But what I've realized later on is that you never really know if it's true. You're just going by what you hear. And, like, unless you actually did the research yourself, you never really know what the hidden motive is. So that's what's so dangerous about doing these kinds of things. Do I think those kinds of people deserve that? 150 million%. But what if they didn't do that? Like, how do you know? Like, are you just listening to what somebody told you, or did you see the paperwork? Did you read the report? Did you see the whole case? Like, where is your information coming from? So I did. I made that move, and it was USP Terre Haute, and that's how I got tipped up.
So the dude that you hit, what was his name? Do you remember?
I do, but I'll share it with you off air.
Well, I mean, it's the dude that had SAC blasted on his whole forehead, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's all over the internet. I forgot his. I can't
Is
recall.
he? I didn't even know that. I haven't even paid attention, to be honest. But yeah.
So some dudes that are watching that know SAC members, there might be some SAC members or ex-SAC members watching. Chaos might watch this, but that dude is known as, hey, look, he was involved in something. He had SAC blasted on his forehead. You're the dude that ended up getting him, right?
I didn't get chaos. I got another
I
guy.
didn't say I said the other dude that had SAC blasted on his
Oh,
foot.
yeah.
And
In
let me
front of
correct this.
commissary.
I don't think Chaos ever got God. I think Chaos was a very dangerous dude, very
Super.
respectful, very intelligent. And I'm saying that because he is a friend of mine, and I helped him get out of prison. And he was a serious dude, and maybe he may very well
Super
fall
serious
on
and dangerous. And him and I have met. I thought about this last night, and I think we actually were on the yard together for like a week or so. And so I ask him, you'll see, he'll know exactly who I am, JD. But I'm telling you right now, like he was a good dude. I have nothing against him at all. Nothing against anybody really. I mean, yeah, that situation with Brad was a shitty situation, but I look at it all like this: I had a choice. And then one of the messages I really wanted to get across today was that when you get into prison, and you know this, brother, that you get into prison and you have choices that you can make, and you can make your life easier or you can make it a whole lot harder. And I know that the pressure is there and that it's hard to not get involved, but the problem is that it's a double-edged sword because you get involved and then you get the stature and you get tipped up and all that, but then you don't go home and you spend 6 or 7 years of your 15 in the fucking box, and for what? Like, it's not a fun thing, man. And I guess my point is that just because you make a mistake and you go in there doesn't mean you have to make those choices.
I agree with you 100%. So when you hit this dude, you have to stab him, or you guys just put the beats and boots on him?
Oh, I used, actually, it was a plexiglass piece. So I used a plexiglass piece, and Eric used just his boots and fists. But that was how that went.
So when you book this dude, how many times do you hit him?
Probably, I don't know. I would say at least 7 or 8. 7 or 8, I think, is what the incident report said. They
Is
were
he
they were they were superficial wounds though. Like, I'm gonna be honest, if it was a steel piece, it would have been all bad. But because it was a plexiglass piece, and I don't even, to be honest, I don't even like talking about this stuff because I'm not proud of this at all. But I mean, it's just facts of what happened. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, I plugged him with it like I said. I think the incident report said 7 times, and none of them were serious. He got worse. He got a worse beating just from like the boots than he did from the plexiglass bullshit knife.
is he fighting back?
Well, he didn't really have a chance. He got hit, and he went down, and then the whole time he's kind of just covering up, and we were just.
Prison working him. I mean, it is what it is. I'm asking you these questions for a reason, but we're gonna come full circle. Don't worry about that. We'll
I
get
feel you, man. I just don't want to like put like the. I guess I just don't want to like make it sound like I'm happy or proud of that stuff. Like, I don't. That's not my message. You know what I mean? Yes, I had to do it. Yes, it happened and whatever. But the point is that it's not. I still to this day I'm not happy about it. I really regret what I did.
Well, the message is that people need to hear this, right? So they don't get themselves in a position like, and it bothers me, dude. And I told you that it bothered me. A position like Ricky Fackrell, Kramer ends up catching a 20 piece. He catches another 20 years. He's got 40 years. Don't really have shit to really look forward to. But Ricky had an out date, man. Ricky was going home, and he takes Ricky with him on this mission, right? And Ricky, I really don't believe Ricky thought he was going to kill this dude, but he kills him, and now he had a death sentence, and then he killed someone else, and they doubled him up over there. So, I mean, he's got 2 bodies, right? And they were going to kill him. He's off death row now. But, I want people to hear that stuff, the stuff that goes into this. Like, this dude was part of this crew, walked around like he was probably one of the baddest. I know who he is. I was actually in a hole with him. He walks around like he's probably one of the baddest dudes around. And you know what? When it comes down to it, he falls on the ground and people are putting the beats to him, and there's not much he can do. This is the reality of prison and the reality of prison life and part of the message. You know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah. Agreed. Thank you for helping me understand a little bit more.
Yeah, but we'll get there. So, you end up putting in this work. They said, and I'm going to ask you some questions now. They send you on other missions, right? You said you had some other missions to take care of. What did you have to do?
Here's the thing. The other couple missions weren't really missions. They were more just like little smashings or punching people in the face, and just the only real actual like, hey, go do this mission I had was that incident in front of commissary at USP Terre Haute. That was it. But other than that, I mean, but don't get me wrong, I've been involved in a whole lot of other bullshit. You know what I mean? Not actual missions, but like, fights. And I got jumped by the Mexican mafia one time. Me and my friend Boston, we were at MDCLA, and he was upstairs, and I was out on the rec deck working out. We were separate at the time, and we were cellies. We're the only two white dudes in the whole unit. And one of the things that was really like it was a commodity, a very wanted commodity, was a plastic stool. And we had three. We had one for me, one for him, and then we had one that was we had cut a hole in that we used to make uh, prison wine in, Pruno, or whatever you want to call it. And so we literally wouldn't give them one of the stools. We said, no, sorry, we need it for another white dude that comes in. Plus, this is where we cook our wine. So sorry. And then they decided that that just wasn't okay. So we got jumped, and I shattered my nose and had to go to the hospital and all that. Had my nose reset and all that stuff. But that was from the Mexican mafia.
Boston. Who was it? It wasn't Billy Breimer, was it?
No, it was Boston. His name was give me a second and I'll remember. J- Jason Sorrell.
Oh, the two brothers.
His name, I don't he didn't have a brother. His name was just Jason Sorrell. He was from Boston. He was a super cool dude. He even knew that whole, like, I don't know, he knew all those Boston mobster guys. In fact, we were in the shoe when they busted Whitey Bulger at MDCLA, and they brought Whitey. So the lieutenant, his name was Lieutenant Gavin. He came in and he was all, because Boston was obviously from Boston, so he was all, and we had a good rapport with this dude. And so we were like, hey, or he goes, hey, you're gonna get a neighbor here for the night. And he was like, well, who? And he goes, Whitey Bulger. And we're like, what? You caught that dude? And they sure enough, they did. They brought him in for about 3 or 4 hours, and I want to say they brought him in late at night, like 10, 11 o'clock, and flew him out at like 2 or 3 in the morning. So he was only there for a few hours, but yeah, they brought that dude next door to us.
Absolutely crazy, right? You're there when that dude gets busted.
Yeah, that was wild.
So, a little bit more about your situation, right? How you ended up in prison. You're really not from the United States, are you?
Well, technically, yes. Like, I was born in Texas, and then, but my family's from Cali. And when I was just a young baby, we moved up to Canada, and my dad started a church, like a Christian Judeo-Christian church, evangelical free church, actually. And so I grew up in Canada. By the time I dropped out of high school early, by the time I was 18, I was doing corporate account management for a pretty decent sized company in Canada. It was a subsidiary of TELUS Mobility, which is like Verizon Wireless's access, or a sister company. And so I was working for them, and I was doing like corporate account management. And by 18, I was clocking in probably 100, 150 a year at 18, which was pretty good at the time, especially like, this would have been 94. So this would have been 2000, would have put me at 16. So this would have been like 2001 or two, maybe in there. And so, bottom line is that all worked fine until the organized East Indian Mafia, which I had some friends up there that they knew, they found out that I was actually an American citizen and only a landed immigrant in Canada. So my friend, his name was Be Real, pulls me up and says, hey, I want you to go for a meeting with this guy and let him talk. And I was like, okay. So I went and talked to this dude, and he was like, look, how much do you make a year? And I was like, what, 150, 100, somewhere in there, like thinking I'm pretty cool. And he's like, you want to make that a month? I said, what? And so I ended up starting to drive for them. And that's a whole nother story. But I was basically driving pounds of marijuana from Washington State to California, picking up cocaine, bringing back keys of coke, and dropping them back off in Washington. And someone else would jump them across the border. So this goes on for quite some time. I end up getting my own connections. So I ended up bringing the weed down, selling the weed, getting the coke, bringing the coke back, and then jumping the coke across the border. So I was making money on all different tips, and I ended up getting hit for over 150 keys of coke, like 287,000 hits of ecstasy, and all kinds of money.
And what was your sentence?
My sentence was 141 months in the feds and 3 years in state for 4 DUIs and possession, unlawful firearm possession. So it was like some bullshit, barely a felony. Like I just had an unregistered pistol, but it was in a carrying case with the trigger lock and everything. It just wasn't registered. So I got 3 years in state, which I did I actually did like 20 months. And right before I was about to parole from from state prison. They picked me up by the feds, and I got sentenced after fighting the case. Obviously, I got sentenced to 141 months in the feds.
Let's talk about state prison. You're in California State Prison?
Yes, sir. I went to reception in Tehachapi, and then I just because it was only DUIs, I ended up going to the minimum yard at Chino, and just spent my time there.
So how was that? Kind of just laid back camp?
To be honest with you, not really. I mean, dude, that yard's wild. I mean, there's a bunch of youngsters there for nothing. They're trying to prove themselves. So it was a gong show too, bro, to be honest with you. I mean, I was there during, if you look back and you look at the biggest riot, and well, there might have been one since, but at least up until 2009, because I got hit in 2008 and then I go in. So somewhere in between like 2009 or 10, it was like the biggest riot in the history of Chino State Prison, and I was there for that riot.
Even at the low yard?
Yeah, we rioted at the low yard too. It wasn't nearly as bad, of course, but I mean, we still, I mean, they use anything they can to kind of get off. So there was definitely violence there too. But yes, you're right. I mean, the majority of the violence, like the bad shit, was obviously not at the minimum. But we went on lockdown. I mean, there was fights everywhere. It was still pretty crazy.
Was it racially segregated in the low yard?
100%, without a doubt.
Who approaches you when you get there? Dudes walk up to you, what's up, Wood? I mean, how's
Wh-
that?
White dude, same thing. It's the same exact thing. In fact, it's almost funny because what I realized was that the lower yard, just this is my experience, the lower yard, like Chino Minimum, pushed harder politics than some of the lower yards in the feds that I've been to. Like we're talking like they were pushing like 3 yard politics on minimum yards. Like, I mean, dude, they're smashing dudes, like literally caving people's faces in for spitting in the sink.
I mean, a major violation spitting that sink around the wrong person, right?
100%. But that's what I'm saying. Like, they don't think that just because it was a minimum, it still wasn't dangerous. I mean, it fucks with your brain too. Believe me. And you have way more access to fucking weapons and things to make crazy shit out of. So believe me, people, the minimum you are, and you have more shit to make alcohol with. It's easier to get drugs, so people are getting fucked up all the time. Like it's not a joke either.
Let me ask you this. When you get to the feds, right? Is it a big difference for you when you walk into the feds after coming from California?
Yeah, big time. I mean, the politics in California state, um, in my opinion, are much more severe than the lower yards at the feds. You get to the higher ones, like the obviously the highest one I was at was the Blue and Gold program at USP Terre Haute, which was a 3 phase, step down program. It was step down for ADX. That was the highest level I was at, and yeah, that was gnarly too. But I mean, you know, uh, yeah, I mean to answer your question, yes.
How old were you when you end up catching this case and you end up going to federal prison or state prison? I mean, obviously you went to the state first.
State first, yeah. I just turned 24.
Just turned 24, got a bunch of time. Do you know you got to do the 3 over there and then you're heading to the feds?
I had no idea. Like, here's what was kind of crazy. I didn't know that I was going to get indicted. We had some ideas, like in the sense that we had a couple of loads go down. One of the loads that was in the indictment that I was going to tell you about was my driver Greg. Um, we would use these backpacking backpacks that have like an aluminum brace, and he put, you know, or well, he didn't. I did. I put 250,000 hits of ecstasy in this thing. He would drive it to Washington State from California, cross it across the border, and we had this place um, that was right on the border of like it was actually, I'll just tell you where the Canadian town was. It was called Creston, British Columbia, and it touches to Washington State and Idaho, and it like all forms this little triangle. And we had a friend of a friend that owned a property close by there and knew that if we crossed through a cemetery, we could get to a gravel road with a stop sign, and that was Canada. So we would sync our Blackberries. We were using a PGP encrypted Blackberry server. We were using so you had to have like a password to send a message, a password to receive a message, and if you enter the wrong password in too many times, it deletes the whole Blackberry. and they were set up on their own private network. They worked for 6 months. They were about $1,000 a piece. So we would get them for all the team members in our crew. And point is that once we figured out this jump spot, we would literally facilitate the sales of the marijuana, or at the time the ecstasy, and then we would facilitate the buying of the cocaine, which we would also make at least $1,000 a key on that. And then on top of that, we would make another $1,000 for driving the coke back a key, and then on top of that, we made another $1,000 for jumping the coke across the border. And if we're doing 40 at a time, do the math; it adds up real quick. So we went through the cemetery. All our blackberries are synced for like late at night, and we literally, the one we got busted on is that Greg hopped through the cemetery, dropped the first backpack off, picked up the coke, starts hiking back, but by this time it's dark and it's like a field with an abandoned barn, and he gets his foot stuck in a pothole, falls over with this backpack with 250,000 hits of ecstasy in it, and compound fractures his ankle. Leaves the backpack in the middle of the field, fucking army crawls back to the car where his niece, that was my girlfriend at the time, was it driving, and he's like, "Go! I got to go to the hospital." And she's like, "Not without JD's pills, we don't." She literally, all 105 pounds of her, fucking crawled back into this field, found the bag of pills, drug it back across the fucking border, to be frank, loaded it in the car somehow, got it up there with two hands and flipped it into the trunk, dropped Greg off at the hospital, and drove right back to Cali with my pills. And because we were talking about this on these Blackberries that happened to be owned and operated by the DEA through a server called Goosebomb, they ended up intercepting over 150,000 PGP encrypted messages, and ended up taking down two indictments, the first one and then the superseding one, which I was in, and then there was 27 people in the superseding indictment, of which I was number 2, only because the number 1 guy was the link between. He was basically the guy that sold us the phones.
So the DEA, I mean, wow. I mean, that's crazy. You're involved in this whole smuggling operation pretty much. What's it like when you meet the Connect? I mean, people see the movies all the time and they think that that's how it really is. How was it for you when you had to deal with your plug?
You know what's crazy? No one's ever asked me that before. So for me, like what it was at this point in time is it was kind of like a lead up. So I was working for Telus Mobility, like I said, a subsidiary called Access Wireless, and I was kind of in two groups of people. I was on one side, had like the bad crowd. On the other side, I had the more, standard crowd. And so I was always tempted to go towards the bad crowd. And so I did just that. And so I ended up getting asked to go on a collection. And a guy had owed like $15,000, which later on wasn't a big deal, but at the time that was a monstrous amount of money. And so it's like, so I was asked to go on a collection to help collect this dude's 15 grand. Well, to make a long story short, because that's probably a story in and of itself, I was there with two other guys, and I hate to say this, but this is the brutal reality. They strung they strung the guy that we were picking up the money from. They strung his pit bull across. It was an A-frame in the living room, and they threw the rope through the A-frame, hung the pit bull, and basically unalived the pit bull right in the living room to try to get this dude to pay this money. And it was just super crazy and really traumatizing, because I'm a huge dog lover. I have a beautiful little pup right here. It's at my feet right now. But my point is that was just crazy. So because I had that and I had that in my brain, I think that they wanted to they saw that I was solid, that I could handle myself under crazy situations. We beat the dude up. We ended up getting charged with like 12 felonies in Canada for that. Like all kinds of, they all ended up getting dropped because neither of them showed up to court to testify. But bottom line is that we were charged with like 12 major felonies for that. And after that, they saw that I didn't turn. That's when they found out that I was actually an American citizen. So when Be Real called me and said, "Hey, go meet with my guy," I went to just a steakhouse, and we just had a steak, and he just said it just like I said it. Asked me what I made a year, asked if I wanted to make that a month. I said, yes. And he said, okay. So this is where it gets crazy, though. He he tells me, he goes, if you want to do this, I need to make something crystal clear. And I said, what? And he goes, you need to become a complete ghost. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, you can't talk to any of your family. You can't talk to any of your friends. In fact, I want you to flush basically throw your phone away. I want you to, none of that. He goes, here's a phone. Here's $5,000 cash. Go get yourself a hotel room in downtown Seattle and wait for this phone to ring. Don't use it for anything else. Don't call anybody. Hold this thing on you like it's your life. And when this rings, you answer it. And I was like, okay. So that's what happened. And that segues into the story on how I met my first partner at that time, which his name was Phil. He ended up owing these guys 600 and something $1,000. They were they were going to kill him. They said if I didn't work with him and help him pay this debt off, then they were going to smoke him and I could just go back to Canada and forget any of this ever happened, which I knew wasn't going to happen. So I basically worked my whole first year for free for just expense money to help Phil pay off a 600,000 debt to the organized East Indian Mafia out of Canada, and then started making money after that.
So this is the East Indian crew. A lot of power, dangerous in Canada.
Super, yeah, 100%.
No problem putting you to sleep if they have to, right?
Not even close. And in fact, one of the guys I used to work with pretty closely, he was one of the guys that helped jump the product across the border. His name was T, and his favorite tools. He used to always talk about it. He'd have a couple drinks or something, and he would talk about how his favorite tool was a blowtorch and a steel, like a wire hanger. And he used to just talk about the pain that he'd inflict on people with those instruments, and I believe him completely.
Were you ever afraid dealing with these dudes? Like, oh shit.
Oh, with 100% certainty. I mean, I got kidnapped at one point. I was held hostage for 5 days. I was zip tied to a chair with an ice pick at my nuts. They tried to blame a robbery. $600,000 got taken from a house that I had in Huntington Beach. And we let a guy from Canada, kind of doing the same thing I was doing, stay there at that home. And he left a cardboard box with like almost $700,000 in one of the bedrooms. And what I think happened later on is that one of the guys he was working with, Samoan dudes, I believe, they ended up basically inviting him to a barbecue, went into my house while he was gone, took that money, and then Chris couldn't take responsibility for that. So he tried to blame it on me. And next thing you know, I get kidnapped. They take me into this fucking room with painter's plastic. Exhibit's bodyguard, this massive Samoan dude, literally picks me up in the chair and screaming in my face and all this stuff, and ends up letting me know, like, after the whole interrogation was kind of over, he was like, look, man, he goes, I can't tell you what's going to happen from here, but he goes, I've made a living from doing this kind of thing, and I can tell beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are innocent, that you didn't do this. So that was yeah, I was definitely scared of these people. I mean, they should be feared.
So at that point, when all that stuff's happened, even though you know you didn't do nothing, is there ever any thoughts in your mind like, I need to get out of this situation? I need to be done with this shit?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I fought a battle with myself for a long time. I mean, God was always right there knocking on the door. And, I grew up in a Christian home, played drums in a worship team. Like, I grew up in a very, religious kind of family. And so I've always had that kind of like nipping at the edges. And basically, for a long time, I kind of just threw it away for the love of money. And I was with this girl. Her name was Christine, and Christine ended up getting pregnant. I'm going to tell you something on this podcast that I think only one or two people in this whole world know. Uh, um, but Christine, I always tell people that Christine had a stillbirth at the end of like her. It was basically like midway through, I believe, her third trimester, so like eight months or so. And she even told me at the beginning that it was a stillbirth, but it turns out she went to Canada, flew up there with her mom, and had a late term abortion. So I lost, a baby that I had been planning on having for like 7 months. And and then on top of that, she also had a kid named Joey, and I helped. He stayed with us for quite a while, and I helped kind of raise him in a sense for a solid period of time. So I had that taste of fatherhood, and I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like I just noticed the like you had said, the prison system, and like just there's so many fathers there. There's so many people there that are literally getting their only chance to have a relationship with their kids taken away, albeit because they made a mistake. But the problem is if you get involved in things like I did and make the mistakes that I did, it's a lot harder to get out and make your life right because you get stuck in that trap, and it's just not. It's not the right thing to do, man. I'm telling you, there's easier, better ways to go about it. I believe.
Yeah, there's easier, better ways to go about a lot of things in life, but sometimes we make choices and we're like, damn, I wish I didn't do that 10, 15 years later, right?
100%. 100%.
What's your
Yep.
biggest regret? Biggest regret in life, man? All the time that you did and joining a gang and being involved in some pretty, brutal violence. What do you regret most in life, man?
I regret. I regret. I regret not loving and letting myself be loved. I regret simply that. I feel like I have a lot of love in my heart and I want to share it with a lot of people, with everybody. And I feel like I regret the most that I've hurt people that I cared about. And if I could go back and change it, I certainly would. But with that being said, I also don't think that I'd have the ability to maybe speak to some of the people that I could speak to now that I've seen and done the things that I've done. And this isn't about me, brother. This is about the work that like literally God has done in my life. And and like I said, I really have a heart for the way that they're treating people in prison. And I just have to think that there's a better way.
I feel you. Do you think prison affected you? Because you said there's, people that you can't talk to because of what you've been through. And has prison affected you mentally and emotionally?
Oh, brother, without a doubt. I mean, I can't sit here and have this conversation with you without making it crystal clear that brother, prison hurt me. Prison hurt my brain. It hurt my body. I mean, it really affected me. And I'm not asking for sympathy. I did what I did, and I deserved to go there according to the court. So, I'm not mad at myself for that per se. But I will say that 100%, man. Like I feel like I could have done so much more for people than going and doing that, because I feel like if I had all that time, I could have just done so much more. But who knows? God has a plan, and maybe this is it.
How long you been out now?
Well, I got out of the halfway house in um, April of 2021.
And you've been out this whole time. What are you doing for work?
I do production for a theater in Beverly Hills called the Saban Theater. So we host. We have 2,000 seats. So we host concerts and movie premieres, comedy shows. We've done some things with Paris and Nicole Hilton recently. We did a movie premiere with what's his name, Nick Jonas. Um, we did a big thing over the holidays. It was like a Christmas Carol, and some of the guys from Sons of Anarchy and a bunch of other famous people were there. So we do a bunch of stuff like that. So I do production. So I went to music school when I got out of prison. I went to Musicians Institute of LA, and I actually had to step away from that because it was just too much of a financial burden. I just couldn't hack it. And so I stepped away from that. But in the interim, I gotten a degree in hotel management through California City College, and I was actually a supervisor at a company called Chrysalis. And things were going okay, but it was in Skid Row. It was just a shitty, like a bad environment, and it just wasn't the right fit. So I ended up quitting Chrysalis, and then ended up getting this job at Saban doing production. And I really wanted to be in music for most of my life. You know, I play drums and piano and some other things. So I really love music and love that environment. So it's hard on the body, I'll tell you that. 15-hour days sometimes, and just like, I'm getting old, man. 41, and so it's, I'm feeling it now like I wouldn't before. But it's a very cool experience. I met my best friend now. His name is Brandon. I met him there, and he's turned into just an absolute blessing in my life. And we actually have been talking about maybe starting a podcast, but his story is just so crazy because, he got hit in the head with a rock club or with a hammer like I did, only it was by his ex-wife. And, he's trying to get his kids back right now. And they were taken for no reason. And there's just a lot of similarities in our conversations because it's like fathers, kids, being stripped of their rights for no justifiable reason. And, that's so I really want to get that message out there too, man. Like, dads are important, families are important.
When you did get out of prison, right? You ever have trouble sleeping at night or just, going out in public?
Oh, brother, I struggle with that to this day. Like, I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, when even talking to you and reaching out like I did on your podcast, this was something that took everything in me. Like, I've literally isolated. It's only in the last I'm just being real here, brother. Like, it's only in the last 7 or 8 months that I've actually like really gotten a network. Like, when I got out, bro, I didn't have anybody. I got remanded from the halfway house for actually, this is makes me sound stupid, but whatever. I smoked some pot while I was in the halfway house, and they nailed me for it. They weren't doing testing because it was COVID and whatever, so I thought I could get away with it, and it was stupid, but whatever. I ended up finishing the last 120 days of my halfway house time at MDCLA, and because of that, I lost all my contact information and everything. And I was like, so I get out of the MDCLA after doing that last little 120 days, and I had nobody. All my family's all in Canada. Like, I had nobody. So I'm like, what am I going to do here? So I ended up like kind of just working slowly. I ended up started in shared living, which, by the way, coming from a guy that has my kind of past, I went and lived in shared living with, a 5-bedroom house where I rented one bedroom and all the other bedrooms were rented by like, African American families or single moms with kids or, just people, period. And it was just a really crazy situation. So I finally got a better job, like I said, at Chrysalis, supervisor, worked my way out of there. And then, now I've gotten my own spot and my head's starting to come back. I'm sleeping better now. I just, things are getting better, but I'm not going to lie when I tell you it's taken a lot of time, and I'm still crazy as a 3-legged pit bull. There's no, there's no question in that.
I want to ask you this, after them dudes hit you, where'd you end up going after you got hit?
After I got hit, I went from USP Terre Haute to Ferreton, New Jersey, I believe.
So you ended up in Farrington at an FCI after you got hit.
Yep.
Completely done with the gang life.
Yep. 100%. Joined a band. Ended up getting involved in the music program, and all I used to do is just basically go to the yard and play music, and we'd have shows on the yard, and it was just a much better environment, although still messed up. I mean, there was still like the odd altercation or whatever the case may be, but I just decided that, like, when I got that letter from my dad, I was like, he's right. I mean, all this work I've put in, all this stuff I've done on, like, out here on the streets, like, all that's going to be for nothing if I just make this my life. So I had a choice.
Bunch of white dudes are sitting around, they're SAC gang members, and there's some dudes that are Christians, or someone turns into a Christian that they used to kick it with. What would they be calling that dude, man?
What, a Christian?
Yeah, let's say that it was a dude
A
that they
lame?
knew. What would they call him?
A lame?
Yeah, I mean, they were like, man, dude's a lame right there, bro, but it ain't really nothing lame about changing your life, right?
There's not at all. That's the whole point. Like, so picture this. You're a 24-year-old kid. You go to a place. You're looking for somebody to look up to. You're looking for a positive influence. You're looking for a role model. You want to be liked. You want to be loved. You're starving for real human contact and not superficial prison stuff. So you meet a guy that's like, look, man, just you're my brother, come on in, and they kind of get that whole thing. So then you end up getting this rapport, and they make you feel like part of a family. And then next thing you know, it's like, well, you got to go handle this business, and then like you were talking about before, people getting literally charged with murder, and that was never really the intent. I mean, obviously it's a possibility, but I don't think that was the intent on that hit exactly, is to kill the dude, right? So he didn't. I mean, he had an out date, you know. So I just feel like, bro, like you definitely have a choice, man. And just because you go to prison as a young, fit white dude doesn't mean you have to pick that path. You really don't. It might be a sting to your pride. You might have to suck that up a little bit, but you have to ask yourself, is this where I want to spend the rest of my life? Or do I want to use this time to really dwell on what I could have done differently and make a solid plan for when I get out?
I feel you. When they tattooed that patch on you, how'd you feel that day?
Part of me was horrified, and the other part was also proud. I felt like I was part of something. I was like, I earned this shit. I felt like it. I don't know, man. I felt like I was part of something, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna be all right. Because you got to understand, you think when you're 24 or whatever, maybe by that time I was probably closer to 28. But point is that maybe 29. But point is that, like, when you're doing 15 years, right? It seems like that's 3/4 of your life already on Earth, or at least over half. So my point is like, you look at that, and man, you did 20 yourself. It almost feels like you're never gonna go home. So you're like, well, fuck it. I'll just do what I have to do to survive, and and just kind of just ride the wave.
Some young 24-year-old dude, let's go lower than that. Some 18-year-old dude, he goes to prison, got 20 years, gets around some dudes, and he's thinking about becoming a gang member. We're going to use Ricky Fackrell, right? We're going to take some dude like Ricky Fackrell. He's planning on becoming a gang member and doesn't know if he signs up for this shit, how real it's going to be. That he may end up with the death penalty. That he may be sitting in ADX for years upon years, or sitting on death row talking to people through the vents. He'll never know what it's like to have any type of companionship with a woman ever again in life. He'll never drive a car again. He'll never eat a real pizza. He'll never swim. He'll never go swimming ever again. He'll never be in a swimming pool or in a lake or in an ocean. What message do you give to that young dude like Ricky Fackrell?
I would say this, man. I had a friend named Critter. Critter was from Ohio, and Critter had an 18-year bid, and he ended up hearing that you could get your commissary on death row and watch TV. You could actually have a TV on death row. So Critter executed his cellie, uh, painted a big anarchy sign in blood on the wall, just so that he could get a death penalty and go up to death row so that he could get a TV and commissary. So what would I say to somebody like an 18-year-old Ricky Fackrell or my old friend Critter? Don't freaking do that, man. It is not worth it. Like, it's taken me a minute, but I'm finally feeling like I'm loved. I finally am branching out and doing something that I like to do. I'm having this conversation with you. This is a huge step for me. I mean, brother, it doesn't always have to be like that. And even if you get some ungodly amount of time, who knows what God can work in that time. I mean, you've seen it. Snar went home. I didn't know that until you told me that right now. I assumed so because I knew he let out like 32 people, Obama or Biden rather.
Well, he didn't go home, but he got off death row. He's not going to die in prison.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, like I said, I got no problems with any of them. I love Snar. I would give him a hug right now. But point is that that's just so good, man. But like I said, he didn't know that. He thought he was going to die up there, and now he's got another chance. So you just never know.
Well, listen, man, definitely appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, sharing your experience. Before we go, one last question. If you were a SAC gang member still and you did an interview, what would happen?
Oh, they would want to kill me for sure.
I mean, these are your people, right? These were the people that you were once part of, but you're not really part of that anymore. You stepped away and you're living your best life, bro. I want to see you keep living your best life. I appreciate you coming on. With respect, Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you like what we're doing. With respect, until tomorrow,
Yeah, at JD Win, brother.
we're out.